There is an intrinsic beauty to working with fire. It looks very flashy and flary, and lots of times it seems extremely dangerous. But I do also think that to know the science well enough that you can use it and kind of work with it is quite exciting. Well, hi, I'm Brandon, and I'm a glassmaker. I got into glass blowing relatively by accident. I met a good friend of mine in a sculpture class. We got along really well, and he was in one of the glass classes. I didn't know anything about it, so there was an allure there to kind of bring you into this shop that just, was glowing. Everything was hot and kind of magical looking. So my second semester, I signed up for a glass class. I had my first class on a Tuesday, and that Thursday I changed my major, and then the rest is still going. I wouldn't necessarily say that there's any part of the process I don't enjoy. There's some parts of the process that give me a little bit more anxiety than others. The material that we work with has roughly a 60-second working window. So you're constantly riding in between this zone of not being so hot that you're constantly melting out all your marks, but also not allowing it to get so cold that it breaks while you're trying to work on it. There's a lot of inherent stress in glass, and it does not like to cool down too fast or primarily too uneven. As far as knowing what's happening with the glass, a lot of it at this point is feel, but there's a lot of science involved. There's a lot of signifiers that happen that are reflecting a lot of complex physics and chemistry, but we're approaching it from a completely different angle as artists. So I'm reading temperature ratios a lot, but I'm doing that through color and seeing heat signatures in the material, watching how it's actually moving. I will say at this point there is a tiny voice in the back of my head that's saying like, hey, that's too cold, so you should heat that up right now. I do firmly believe that if you try something even 100 times with glass and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean it's not possible. You just have to really hone in these steps. And oftentimes there's a complexity in a piece that it comes down to seconds. I've worked on things where we've made 3 pieces in a row and everything was fine. And then the 4th piece, we're at that same point and somebody opens the door and the chilly air comes in the room and everything cracks right in front of us, because that's the only factor that was different. It's fascinating and it's different every time. I don't think being a creative for me is a choice at all. There's just something inside me that can't stop making things. And I do think that every human being is inherently that way. I think that we're all creatives. We have it built in us, We're makers. I think it's just finding that thing that keeps you there. And I would always urge anybody, if you have that gut feeling that you should be doing something other than what you're doing right now, is to chase that. Again, I do think everybody's an artist. Maybe you're just into making sauce, that could be your art. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. If it brings you an inherent joy and kind of makes you forget about everything else that's going around, outside of you, I think that's what you should be doing.